Governor Thessa Vor'sai stood in her office overlooking the capital of Valkaris Prime, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Beautiful, tranquil, completely at odds with the political crisis threatening to destroy everything. Governor. Her chief advisor, Voss Kelmer, entered without waiting for permission. In normal times, that would be disrespectful. Now, formality felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. The deadline approaches, Voss said. 6 months since Governor Kale's death. You have 6 months remaining to secure the bloodline continuation. If you cannot demonstrate viable succession, the rival houses will invoke the right of challenge. I am aware. Thessa didn't turn from the window. My daughters remain unbonded. Finding suitable mates for all 5 within 6 months is politically impossible. Then, we must consider alternatives. What alternatives? Every potential mate demands concessions that would weaken our position. We would secure succession only to lose political power. That's not a solution. Voss was quiet for a moment. There is one option, ancient law rarely invoked, the law of singular bond. Thessa turned to look at him. You're suggesting we bond all 5 daughters to a single outsider? It solves multiple problems. One bonding ceremony, one controllable individual with no political ties. Genetic continuation secured without complex negotiations or power sharing with multiple houses. The law of singular bond requires the outsider to be powerless. Property. That means selecting from captured enemies or slaves, yes. Voss met her gaze. I suggest we select a human. Thessa considered this. Humans were relatively new to galactic civilization, physically weaker than Valkari, technologically inferior. They made excellent slaves, obedient when properly controlled, intelligent enough to follow complex orders but not dangerous. A human slave bonded to my daughters, to all 5 of them. You understand how this will be perceived? As pragmatic crisis management, better than civil war. Thessa looked back at the sunset. Her daughters were capable, brilliant, even. Kira commanded military forces with tactical genius. Sira navigated diplomatic complexities with remarkable skill. Lissa's scientific work was groundbreaking. Vessa's administrative capabilities kept their house functioning efficiently. Yenna's intelligence network was formidable, but none of that mattered if they couldn't demonstrate bloodline continuation. Valkari culture was brutal about succession. Power demanded proof of viability. Without it, rival houses would tear them apart. Find a suitable human, she said finally. Healthy, intelligent enough to understand his role, not so educated or strong-willed that he'll cause problems. Someone controllable. It shall be done, Governor. 3 days later, David Chen stood in chains before Governor Thessa Vor'sai, trying not to show the terror he felt. He'd been a slave for 2 years, captured during a pirate raid on the merchant vessel where he'd worked as a medic and security officer. 2 years of hard labor, degrading treatment, and constant fear. He'd learned to keep his head down, follow orders, and not draw attention. But slaves didn't get summoned to the governor's mansion. That only happened when you'd done something very wrong, or when your situation was about to get much worse. The governor was impressive, 8 feet tall, powerful build, skin marked with bioluminescent patterns that indicated noble bloodline. She studied him the way someone might study a tool they were considering purchasing. You are David Chen, human, age 28, captured 2 years ago. You have served as maintenance worker with adequate performance. Her voice was cold, clinical. You have been selected for a different purpose. 5 women stood behind the governor, all Valkari, all bearing family resemblance. Her daughters, David realized. You will be bonded to my daughters under the law of singular bond. Thessa continued. You will provide genetic continuation for our house. You will obey all commands without question. You will have no rights, no autonomy, no claim to any status. You exist solely to serve this house's needs. If you refuse or prove problematic, you will be executed and we will select another human. Do you understand? David understood perfectly. He was being made into breeding stock for an alien noble family. Property. Less than property, a necessary tool to solve their political problems. I understand, Governor. Do you accept this bonding? What choice did he have? Say no and they'd kill him, get another human, repeat the process. At least this way he'd live. At least he'd have somewhat better conditions than hard labor. I accept. The ceremony was brief and impersonal. David provided genetic samples. Signed documents he couldn't read, not that literacy mattered when you had no rights. Stood still while Velkhari officials performed rituals he didn't understand. When it was done, he was legally bonded to all 5 daughters, property of the Vor'sai house, expected to perform his function without complaint. Thessa introduced the daughters formally. Kira, eldest, commands our military forces. Sira, our chief diplomat. Lissa, leading our scientific research. Vesa, managing our administrative systems. Yenna, directing our intelligence operations. You will address them as Lady Kira, Lady Sira, and so forth. You will obey them without question. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not leave the family compound without explicit permission. Do you understand your position? Yes, Governor. Good. You will be housed in the compound. Quarters will be provided. You will be available when required. Your previous life is over. You belong to this house now. David was taken to a room in the servants' section of the massive compound. Better than the barracks he'd been living in, private room, actual bed, attached bathroom. But the door locked from the outside, guards in the hallway. He wasn't a guest. He was a prisoner with slightly better accommodations. He sat on the bed and tried to process what had just happened. He'd been bonded to 5 alien women who saw him as property, expected to father their children to secure their political power. He had no rights, no freedom, no hope of escape. He should be grateful this was better than hard labor, better than execution. But he didn't feel grateful. He felt like an object, like his humanity had been officially erased by legal documents and cultural traditions that didn't recognize his personhood. He was property now. That's what the law said. But in his mind, in his heart, he was still David Chen. Still human, still a person with thoughts and feelings and values. They could own his body, but they couldn't own his mind. They couldn't own his humanity. He didn't know if that distinction mattered, but it was all he had left. The first month was humiliating. David was summoned when the daughters needed to display evidence of their secured bloodline continuation. Formal ceremonies, political gatherings, social events where Velkhari nobility assessed whether the house had truly solved its succession crisis. He stood silently at these events, wearing formal clothing that marked him as property of the Vor'sai house. He wasn't allowed to speak, wasn't allowed to make eye contact with nobility, just stood there while aliens discussed him like he wasn't present. The governor bonded all 5 daughters to a single human, one noble said within David's hearing. Efficient, though using a human seems, beneath their standards. Desperate times, at least he appears healthy, better than civil war, I suppose. David learned to keep his face neutral, learned to ignore the casual dehumanization. What choice did he have? But he also observed, listened, learned about the people who owned him. Kira, the eldest, was under enormous pressure. She commanded the family's military forces while rival houses tested their borders with provocative maneuvers. She worked 18-hour days, grabbed maybe 4 hours of sleep, then returned to work. She was competent but exhausted. Sira, the diplomat, was navigating complex negotiations to maintain alliances that were fracturing after her father's death. Every conversation was a careful dance, show strength without making threats, offer compromise without appearing weak. She was brilliant at it, but the strain showed around her eyes. Lissa, the scientist, was fighting for research funding, while rivals tried to redirect resources to their own projects. Her work on advanced shielding technology could give the house strategic advantage, but politics threatened to kill the project before completion. Vesa, the administrator, was managing economic systems while dealing with corruption, inefficiency, and sabotage from within their own organization. She spent hours reviewing reports, catching discrepancies, rooting out problems. Yenna, the youngest, was hunting for proof of who killed their father. Her intelligence network provided leads, but every lead was dangerous. She was following trails that could get her killed if she pushed too hard. All 5 daughters were carrying crushing burdens, and nobody was helping them because in Velkhari culture, showing vulnerability was weakness. Asking for help was admitting incompetence, so they suffered alone. David watched this and felt something unexpected. Sympathy. He didn't agree with being treated as property, would never accept that he deserved to be a slave, but he could see these women were trapped too, not by chains, but by expectations and culture and roles that demanded perfection without support. One evening, Kira returned to the compound after a training exercise. She was limping, trying to hide it, but David noticed. He'd been a medic. He recognized the gait of someone in pain but trying to push through it. "You're hurt," he said quietly. Kira stopped, turned to look at him with surprise and immediate anger. "I did not give you permission to speak." "I know, but you're injured. That needs treatment or it'll get worse." "That is not your concern." "Maybe not legally, but I was a combat medic before I was captured. I know injuries. That's muscle strain in your left leg, probably from compensating for a previous injury you didn't let heal properly. If you don't treat it, you'll tear something and be off active duty for weeks." Kira stared at him like he'd spoken an alien language, which, in a way, he had. Slaves didn't offer medical advice, didn't speak to owners this way. You were a medic, combat medic with a merchant vessel security team, not a full doctor, but I know field medicine and injury assessment. Kira considered this. She was in significant pain and knew he was right about the injury getting worse. But accepting help from a human slave felt wrong according to everything she'd been taught. "Why would you help me? I'm one of the people holding you as property." "You're hurt. I'm trained to help hurt people. That's not complicated." The logic was so straightforward, so alien to Valkyrie hierarchical thinking, that Kira didn't know how to respond. "You may treat the injury," she said finally, "but this does not change your status." "Understood." David got supplies from the compound's medical facility. Slaves were allowed to access basic medical equipment for their owner's needs. He treated Kira's leg professionally, explaining what he was doing as he worked. "You're applying pressure to the muscle group here. That reduces inflammation and promotes healing. You'll need to rest this leg for 3 days minimum. Continue your regular duties, but no training exercises that stress this muscle group. After 3 days, gentle stretching exercises. After a week, you can return to full activity." Kira accepted the treatment, studying him with new assessment. "You said you were a combat medic. You had a profession before capture?" "Yes, I was doing what I was trained for. Not the best circumstances. Merchant vessel security isn't glamorous, but it was honest work that used my skills." "And now you are property. That must anger you." "It does. I'm human. We believe people shouldn't own other people. That's a fundamental value in human culture. But anger doesn't change my situation. I can be angry about being property and still treat your injury. Both things can be true simultaneously." Kira was quiet while he finished the treatment. "You are not what I expected," she said finally. "What did you expect? Submission or resentment? Humans are supposed to be either obedient slaves who accept their status or angry primitives who constantly rebel. You're neither. I'm a person. People are complicated. We can hold multiple feelings and positions simultaneously. I'm angry about being enslaved. I also recognize you're hurt and I can help. I hate my legal status. I also can see you're under enormous pressure. These aren't contradictions. They're just reality." Kira left without responding, but 2 days later, she sought him out with questions about human military tactics. Apparently, she'd been thinking about what he said about holding multiple positions simultaneously, and she wanted to know if that concept applied to military strategy. That conversation lasted an hour. By the end, Kira had new tactical approaches to consider. Sira had a similar experience. She returned from a failed diplomatic negotiation, visibly frustrated. David was in the common area where slaves waited in case any family member needed them. "May I speak, Lady Sira?" She looked at him with surprise. "Why?" "I might have perspective on what went wrong in your negotiation, if you want it." "You know nothing of Valkyrie diplomacy." "No, but I saw the summary broadcast of the negotiation. You were trying to project strength while offering compromise. In human diplomatic frameworks, that reads as dishonest. Like you're hiding weakness. If you're going to compromise, own it. State clearly what you need and what you're willing to give. Don't dress it up as strength when it's actually flexibility." Sira was offended. "Human diplomacy is primitive?" "Maybe, but the house you were negotiating with has been studying humans. They have human advisors. They know how we think. They read your approach as deceptive because it would be deceptive in human context. If they're applying human frameworks to analyze you, human perspective might help." Sira considered this. Finally, Explain human diplomatic approaches. That conversation went on for an hour. By the end, Sira had new strategies to try. The pattern repeated with the other daughters. Lissa asked for input on a technical problem. Humans approached engineering differently, maybe that perspective would help. Thessa asked about human economic systems. She was trying to identify corruption, and human models might offer insight. Yenna asked him to explain human psychological patterns. She was tracking someone who'd worked with humans and needed to understand their thinking. Slowly, without meaning to, David became useful beyond his intended genetic function. The daughters started seeking him out, started actually talking to him instead of just giving orders, started seeing him as not quite an equal, but not quite property either, something in between that their culture didn't have a category for. Governor Thessa noticed this shift. She summoned David to her office 3 months after the bonding. "My daughters speak to you. Seek your counsel. This was not the intended purpose of your presence in this house. I know, Governor, yet you encouraged this. Why?" "I didn't encourage anything specific. They asked questions, I answered. Seemed rude not to respond when spoken to directly. You could have remained silent. That would have been more appropriate for your status." Would it have helped them? Would silence have solved Lady Sira's diplomatic problems or helped Lady Lissa with her engineering challenges? That is not your concern. Your function is genetic continuation, not advisory capacity. Then why haven't you ordered me to stop? You've known for weeks that I'm talking with your daughters. You could have commanded me to remain silent. You didn't. Why? Thessa didn't answer immediately. Truth was, her daughters were performing better. Kira's military operations had improved. Sira's diplomatic efforts were more successful. Lissa's research was progressing faster. Vessa's administration was more efficient. Yenna's intelligence work was more effective. But admitting that would mean admitting a human slave was contributing meaningful value beyond his intended function. I am allowing this provisionally because it serves the house's interests, but understand your place. You are still property. You exist to serve our needs. Do not presume you have become something more. I don't presume anything, Governor. I know exactly what I am under Velkhari law, but I also know what I am as a human. Those two things don't always align perfectly. What you are as a human is irrelevant under our legal system. Your legal system defines my legal status. It doesn't define my humanity. Those are different things. Philosophical semantics will not change your circumstances. No, but they matter to me. I'm property under your law. But I'm still a person. I still think and feel and have moral positions. You can own my body, but you can't own my mind or my values. Thessa found this conversation deeply frustrating. You are dangerously close to insubordination. I don't think so. Insubordination would be refusing commands or acting against the house's interests. I've done neither. I follow all orders. I help your daughters when they ask. I serve the house's interests effectively. I'm just also maintaining my personhood while doing it. Those aren't contradictory positions. They are contradictory under Velkhari law. Then Velkhari law is wrong about that specific thing. Thessa should execute him for that statement. It was direct challenge to fundamental Velkhari legal frameworks, but she was pragmatic enough to recognize her daughters were performing better with his input. I will allow you to continue advising my daughters because it serves our interests, but you will not express opinions about Velkhari law being wrong to anyone else. That sentiment is dangerous. Understood, Governor. 6 months after the bonding, Thessa called David to her office again. My daughters have changed, she said without preamble. Their thinking has shifted. They question traditions they previously accepted without examination. This concerns me. Changed how? Kira questions military doctrine that prioritizes honor over effectiveness. She says preserving soldiers' lives matters more than traditional approaches. Sira uses diplomatic frameworks that acknowledge our limitations instead of projecting absolute strength. Lissa incorporates human engineering principles that emphasize adaptability. Vessa implements economic transparency mechanisms. Yenna analyzes targets through human psychological models. Thessa looked at David directly. You have introduced human thinking into Velkhari systems. Deliberately or not, you are changing how my daughters approach their responsibilities. Is that bad? You said their performance has improved. Performance has improved, yes. But values are shifting. That's dangerous. If my daughters adopt too many human values, they may start questioning Valkyrie values, including values like slavery. Would that be bad? It would be politically catastrophic. Other houses would see it as weakness, would challenge our right to rule. But would it be morally wrong? Moral abstractions are irrelevant compared to political reality. Are they? Your daughters are learning that effectiveness matters more than tradition, that honesty works better than pretense, that treating people with respect produces better results than domination. These aren't just tactical improvements, they're value shifts. And yes, those values are going to make them question slavery eventually, because slavery is wrong. That is your human perspective. It's my human perspective that people shouldn't own people. Yes, and your daughters are starting to agree with me because the logic is sound. Slavery is inefficient, cruel, and morally indefensible. The only reason it persists is tradition and the unwillingness of people in power to question systems they benefit from. You are advocating for the destruction of our social order. I'm stating facts about morality and efficiency. What your daughters do with those facts is their choice. I'm not making them change. I'm just answering their questions honestly. The crisis came when Kira returned from a military engagement where they'd captured human soldiers. Standard Valkyrie protocol: enslave captured combatants. Kira released them instead, gave them supplies and warned them to leave Valkyrie territory. When Thessa confronted her, Kira said, they were soldiers doing their duty. They surrendered honorably. Enslaving them would be wrong. Wrong? They are defeated enemies. Enslavement is traditional. It's also immoral. David helped me understand that. Slavery is wrong regardless of cultural tradition or legal frameworks. I won't participate in it anymore. You are allowing human morality to override Valkyrie tradition. I'm allowing basic ethics to override cruel tradition. There's a difference, Mother. Tradition isn't automatically correct just because it's traditional. If a tradition is wrong, it should change. Thessa realized the situation had progressed further than she'd thought. Her daughter wasn't just using human tactical advice. She'd adopted human moral frameworks. This was dangerous. If Kira started openly rejecting slavery, other houses would see it as weakness, would challenge their right to rule. But if Thessa punished Kira for showing mercy, she'd alienate her own daughter, drive a wedge into her family when they needed unity. She was trapped by the very solution she'd implemented to save her house. The political crisis exploded 2 weeks later when Lord Vex Corval, leader of a rival house, formally challenged the Vor'sai house's legitimacy. His public statement? Governor Vor'sai has bonded her daughters to a human slave. This slave has corrupted their thinking with alien values. They show mercy to enemies, question slavery, adopt primitive moral frameworks. They have been weakened by human influence and are unfit to govern Valkyrie. He invoked the right of challenge. If Thessa couldn't defend her house's legitimacy within 30 days, formal combat would determine new leadership. Civil war. Exactly what she'd been trying to prevent. Thessa called an emergency meeting, her 5 daughters and David. Lord Vex is using the human's influence as evidence of our weakness. How do we respond? Kira. We demonstrate strength through results. Our military is more effective. Our economy is stronger. Our diplomatic position is improved. Results speak louder than tradition. Sira. We reframe the narrative. The human's input has made us stronger, not weaker. Incorporating useful ideas regardless of source is wisdom, not weakness. Lissa. We can demonstrate technological advantages gained from adaptive engineering approaches. Vesa. Economic data supports our governance. Metrics prove effectiveness. Yenna. I have intelligence on Vex's vulnerabilities. His own house is failing. We can expose that. All logical arguments, but they were missing the fundamental point. David spoke up. May I say something? Thessa, speak. You're all arguing from Valkyrie frameworks, but Vex isn't challenging your competence. He's challenging your legitimacy based on values. You can't win that argument with metrics and results. You need to address the values question directly. How? By being honest about what's happened. Yes, I've influenced how your daughters think. That influence has made them better leaders through improved tactics and strategies, but it's also made them question traditions like slavery. That's the real issue Vex is raising. He's not afraid of your competence. He's afraid your changing values might spread, because if you change, others might follow. That threatens the entire social order. So we've already lost because we adopted your perspective? No. You need to decide what you actually believe. Do you believe slavery is wrong? Do you believe old traditions need to change? Or are you willing to defend traditional values you don't agree with just to maintain political power? The daughters looked at each other. This was the question they'd been avoiding. Kira spoke first. I believe slavery is wrong. I won't defend it to maintain power. Sira, I believe our diplomatic isolation is caused by how we treat other species. We need to change. Lissa, I believe our technological stagnation comes from rigid thinking. We need adaptability. Vesa, I believe our economic system built on exploitation is unsustainable. Yenna, I believe our intelligence failures come from refusing to understand others. We need perspective. One by one, Thessa's daughters declared positions that contradicted Velkari tradition. Thessa looked at her daughters, at the human who'd somehow changed them, at the choice before her. I choose to defend you, she told her daughters, all of you, and your values, even if it costs us political power. She addressed David, you have changed my family. I thought I was using you as a tool, but you used your position to introduce ideas that undermine our social order. That was strategic. I didn't try to undermine anything. I just answered questions honestly and treated people with respect. The changes were your daughter's choices, not my manipulation. Nevertheless, you introduced ideas that challenged our traditions. Yes, because some of your traditions are wrong, slavery is wrong, I won't apologize for believing that or expressing it. I'm not asking you to apologize, I'm acknowledging what happened. She turned to her daughters. We will face Vex's challenge honestly. We'll admit this house has changed. That we've adopted values influenced by human thinking. That we believe those values make us better leaders, and we'll let the people decide. The formal challenge took place in the grand arena before assembled nobility and common citizens. Both houses presented their positions. Lord Vex argued with traditional fervor. The Vor'sai house has been corrupted by human influence. They show mercy to enemies, weakness. They question slavery, attacking our social foundation. They adopt primitive values from inferior species. They are unfit to rule Velkari. I challenge their legitimacy and claim the right to lead this world toward traditional strength. Thessa responded with careful honesty. The Vor'sai house has changed. We admit this openly. We have learned from multiple sources, including human perspectives. This learning has improved our military effectiveness, diplomatic relationships, technological progress, economic stability, and intelligence operations. But yes, we have also changed our values. We now believe slavery is morally wrong. That showing mercy is strength, not weakness. That learning from others regardless of species is wisdom. That rigid adherence to tradition when better approaches exist is foolish. If the people of Velkaris Prime believe these positions make us unfit to rule, we will accept that judgment. But we will not lie about what we believe. We will not defend slavery to maintain power. We stand on these values and accept the consequences. The crowd was divided. Traditional Velkari were outraged. How dare the governor question fundamental social structures? But younger Velkari and those who'd suffered under harsh traditional systems were intrigued. Maybe change wasn't weakness. Maybe honesty about values mattered. The formal vote was called. Each citizen voted to support the current house or support the challenger. The counting took hours. The result was close. Very close, but Thessa's house won, by 3% of the vote. A small margin, but clear. The victory wasn't because everyone agreed with her values. It was because enough people respected honesty. Respected leaders who admitted what they believed even when politically risky. After the challenge was resolved, Thessa summoned David once more. You have transformed my house in ways I never intended. I thought I was using you, but you were the one who changed us. I didn't change anyone. I was honest about what I believe. Your daughters chose to listen. They chose to change their thinking. That was their agency, not my manipulation. The result is the same.